Good morning, everybody. I'd like to welcome you on behalf of Discovery Bank and Visa here this morning for the release and the launch of SpendTrend 2024. It's great to be able to welcome everybody at One Discovery Place, as well as the media and other stakeholders that are joining us online. It's always a privilege to be able to present statistics and data, and as kind of an actuary, the data that we're presenting today is on a scale that really is exciting. But if you think about kind of where we've come from over the last 12 months from SpendTrend23, the development that's taken place in collaboration with Visa has really been exceptional. So at the outset, I'd like to thank the Visa team for the partnership in SpendTrend24 once again. It's been an absolute privilege for Discovery Bank to partner with Visa in what is a massive data analytics undertaking. And it's really aimed at understanding consumer behavior, consumer trends, and trends in spending among South Africans. But this year, more interestingly and more powerfully, not just in the context of how South Africans are spending, but how South Africans and Discovery Bank clients are spending in the context of kind of their global counterparts. So when you see SpendTrend24, it's not just an analysis of South African spending behaviors and habits. It really capitalizes on Visa's global capability and footprint. And this year we've expanded the analysis to include key South African cities in Durban, Johannesburg, and Cape Town, but then in addition, 11 global cities made up of 5 emerging market cities, 6 developed market cities, comprising 60 million credit cards and 13 billion transactions over a 5-year period. So a kind of a massive meta-analysis of data across the globe, and all sliced and diced into 4 categories of socioeconomic segmentation, from the mass to the mass affluent to the everyday affluent and high net worth segments in each and every one of these markets. So a really kind of deep analytics exercise that informs the findings and observations in SpendTrend24. So without further ado, I'm going to hand over to Lineshree Moodley, who's the country manager for Visa South Africa, who's been our partner in SpendTrend23 and in SpendTrend24, to take you around the 4 key themes that they've observed in SpendTrend24. So Lineshree, over to you.
Thank you, Hylton, and good morning, everybody. It certainly has been a really good journey in getting to today. Over a year ago, we actually brought you SpendTrends 2023, and we're really proud as Visa to have been able to partner again with Discovery to bring you SpendTrends 2024. As a business that operates in over 50 markets, we are deeply passionate about enabling digital payments. And with that, we are constantly working to remove barriers and really look for new innovative solutions of how we bring people into the digital economy. Data serves as a key enabler to do that, providing us with insights and guidance in terms of how we do it. Hylton mentioned the scale of the analysis that was done this year. Over 13 billion transactions over the last 5 years. It covers a population of over 100 million people, and it also covers a GDP in excess of $4 trillion US. So the insights that we have gotten from the SpendTrends 2024 is really powerful. And again, I want to mention that from a Visa perspective, there's really a shared value with Discovery in the commitment to leverage data to really drive innovation as well as driving growth. So today, we are going to share insights and perspectives with you about shifting behaviors, the evolving customer expectations, as well as some of the key themes that we found in a macroeconomic environment for the South African consumers that has been quite challenging. I deeply believe that the insights and key themes we're going to share is going to help our industry come together to look at how do you develop innovative solutions that serves our market across the board, and a way in which these solutions, these innovations are easy, they're convenient, and they're affordable for everybody. So I'm going to start by covering the themes. The first one that we see is that consumers are seeking rewards where they spend the most. In 2023, we've seen across the globe there's been a persistent high inflation, and consumers have actually turned to their bank cards, not just to give them access to additional credit, but also to give them access to the different awards programs that the different banks have. Globally, we know that the loyalty market is something that has always been dynamic, but post the pandemic, we have really seen, it's unleashed really a new wave of innovation. So despite there being geographic differences, despite there being industry differences, there's some key things we see when we look at rewards programs. So consumers are looking for rewards programs where they can enable it quite seamlessly via digital channels. They're looking for rewards that are valuable to them and make them, feel that it's actually special. And then they're also looking at earning rewards at the places where they spend the most. Visa had done a study into looking into the insights of what actually drives loyalty programs. And again, what came out quite prominent in that was that it was around the ease of access to the reward programs, rewards that mattered in terms of where you spent, and also the ability to give me stuff that made me feel valuable, but also understand my needs as a consumer and what it is we're looking at. If I bring it back to the SpendTrend24 results, you see that groceries, retail, travel, and fuel make up almost 2/3 of the spend. Very similar to SpendTrends23. And as Hylton mentioned when we started off, this year we didn't just look at the South African market and Discovery Bank. We actually expanded the research to look at 14 different cities. And these cities actually fell into either emerging markets or more developed markets. And one of the key things we see is that when you're looking at emerging markets, a lot higher proportion of the spend goes to groceries and fuel, which equates to those things that are essential. Whereas when you look at developed markets, they're spending a lot more money on travel as well as eating out. When we looked at travel, we can see that travel has returned to post-pandemic levels, but that built up what we termed revenge travel last year that consumers had coming out of COVID has subsided, not just in South Africa, we see that trend globally. So when you look at the increase in spend from a travel perspective, it was 6%, which was very much in line with the inflation for last year. If I go into the next trend, digital wallet payments in South Africa has become a habit. And what do I mean by that? When we looked at SpendTrend23, contactless was really a key focus for us because we wanted to understand how consumers were adopting it and how it was growing. When we look at the data over the last year, it's really become a habit. We see that consumer preference is to use contactless payment, and this surge in using digital wallets is actually driven by the pays that we see, your Apple Pay, your Samsung Pay, etc. A key point I think worth mentioning is that in the South African market, we still see that majority of the spend on, from a contactless perspective is where consumers actually tap their card at the point of sale. But when you look at digital wallets, we see that it is growing exceptionally fast, and we believe that it will actually become more prominent as we go ahead. And a key driver for the use of digital wallets is really the ease and the convenience. You take your phone, you double-click, you pay for it at the point of sale. It's safe, it's secure, and we believe that more consumers will actually take it up. When we're talking about security and consumers really having comfort using these types of payments, biometric authentication that's built into it, the tokenization services, as well as the authentication, give consumers the comfort to actually use this type of payment. Coming to SpendTrends reports and the data that we see behind this, we saw an increase of 9% on digital wallet spend over the last year, which is really quite significant. And when we compare South Africa to other cities, be it emerging or developed countries, where there is data and we were able to share in the report, South Africa growth actually outpaces the rest of the globe. If we go into the third trend, consumers are embracing phygital. So, given the proliferation of smartphones, consumers are using their smartphones for everything really across their shopping journey. From looking up, exactly what's available online for discounts, for coupons, for access to reward programs, and everywhere from, just originating that transaction to actually paying with your mobile at a point of sale. Consumers are using their smartphones. We've done a study last year from Visa, and we see that 85% of all people in the CEMEA region actually expect that digital will be integrated into their shopping experience when they actually go through by a merchant. If we look at some of the results coming out from the SpendTrends24 report, we see that South Africans are shopping online a lot more, and the spend per average card online actually outpaced face-to-face growth by 5 times. So we see the online growth was 10% versus in-store, which was 2%. But we also know that South Africa has a very strong mall culture. And so, people typically will do research online, look at where they can get the best discounts, where the specials are, etc. But they still do want to go into the mall and actually make purchases. The last theme is on online, and we see that cross-border spend here is on the rise. And there's really a couple of key drivers on this. So it's the e-commerce, it's entertainment, and it's also streaming. We've seen during the pandemic that consumers actually turned to this as a form of entertainment, and we've sort of seen steady growth over the last couple of years as well. I think it's important, or it's interesting to note that the third most visited e-commerce platform in South Africa is the US version of Amazon. And it's interesting because we also have a lot of good, or we have a really good local option. We see that music streaming subscriptions has the potential to grow to $1.1 billion by 2027. And then we also picked up that there's been a 30% year-on-year growth in revenue when it comes to esports. So a lot of good growth being seen in the online space, and we believe that South Africa is going to continue to actually grow in the space. So why does all of this matter in terms of the trends that we're seeing? I think, or the key themes, and I think one of the things is that we believe that as an industry, if we really look at the insights provided today, we've got to provide solutions and innovations that actually meet the needs of consumer across the different income segments. So the first one is consumer rewards. With the emergence of Generation Z, or Gen Z, as well as a new sophisticated customer, loyalty is really taking on a whole new meaning. People expect to interact with brands where they share a common purpose, where they share common values. And so we need to look at moving away from just rewarding transactional behavior to how do you create a platform for a consumer that allows them to interact with it where they believe there's value, there's trust, and it's relevant to what it is they need. The second one on digital wallets, we believe, like I just said, that we're going to see phenomenal growth in digital wallets going forward. We've already seen quite a significant growth in it. And as consumers become more and more comfortable, a lot more will actually start to use their wallets. And financial services, and I think broader players in the ecosystem also need to understand what are the behaviors, what are the needs, and how do you structure value propositions to actually be relevant to those markets. The next one is on digital shopping experiences. So we've seen globally where merchants actually provide digital payments in store, where you have online stores that has different capabilities that allow consumers to start their transaction online, get it delivered to them, or go and pick up in the store, it's picking up. And this is something we need to collectively work towards as well. And the last one is on online cross-border payments. We really believe there's strong opportunity here to capitalize on this revenue opportunity. You know, cross-border allows us, consumers, to buy products and services from across the globe. You know, it contributes to connecting economies, it contributes to global financial stability, and it is key when you look at the data in terms of how we are seeing online cross-border spend actually increase. One of the key things as these digital interactions increase online, obviously, is the security element. And I think there is a need for us to partner across the ecosystem to really protect this vibrant economy. From a Visa perspective, we've invested billions of dollars in this over the years to make sure that when the consumer is doing that digital transaction, they feel safe and they feel secure. And then there's also a lot of consumer education that needs to happen to make the consumers feel comfortable. So I'm going to wrap up with just a couple of reflections from my perspective. I think we've again, through SpendTrends24, seen a real resilience of the South African consumer in the face of a lot of economic challenge over the last year. The themes and the insights that we're seeing, I have to translate into solutions that actually meet the needs of consumers. It needs to be safe, it needs to be seamless, it needs to be secure, and it needs to resonate with consumers. We've also seen digital play quite strongly. We had that prediction last year. It's something that we've actually seen come into force in terms of this year. And when we look at the South African market, they're really leading the charge when it comes to any payments that are, that are digital. But I think as an industry, we need to work together to ensure that we sustain the momentum that we see, and we come up with solutions that are not only innovative, but they also help from a socioeconomic perspective as well, in terms of including more people into the digital financial ecosystem. So thank you for your time. And again, it was really a great collaboration with Discovery Banks. Thank you, Hylton. I'm going to hand over back to you now.
Thank you so much, Lineshree. As Lineshree reflected on sort of the four mega trends and themes coming through SpendTrend24 and more broadly through the kind of the Visa lens, I'm going to go through three kind of key areas that we really focused on in the spend trend analysis. Firstly, how much people spend, the kind of the highest, at the very highest level, the kind of the actual flows that we see going through credit cards and at a consumer level, how much they're spending. Secondly, what people are spending on, the kind of the breakdown at a more granular level in terms of the discretionary spend and where it goes every single day among South Africans and more broadly against their global counterparts. And then how people spend, the actual mechanisms, the kind of the digital versus physical, and the sort of the trends that we see in people's behavior around how they spend their money and transact. And as we kind of both alluded to, the scale of this analysis is absolutely astounding in terms of the amount of data that's being processed by the teams in order to really provide the analyses, the trends, and the comparisons. If we start at the very highest level, last year we reflected on the significant bounce that we saw post-COVID in terms of South African spend and consumer spend coming out of COVID, and we saw about a 19% increase or differential between inflation and the spend per active card amongst the base that we analysed. Coming into the SpendTrend24 analysis, we've seen a significant moderation where spend has continued, and once again, I suppose reflecting on reflecting on Lineshree's comment around the resilience of the South African consumer, seeing that come through clearly in the sense that while South Africans are kind of well known for their resilience, you see it in the spend as well. This last year has been complex in terms of the interest rate environment in which we found ourselves. If you go back a year, the kind of global inflation levels that we saw peaking across all markets, including South Africa, really kind of drove spend. In this last year, we've seen almost the opposite in a sense. We've seen kind of a moderating of inflation, but at the same time, interest rates increasing globally, and South Africans were impacted exactly the same way. That's created significant pressure on overall spend, but we've seen consumer spend continue be resilient and really kind of increasing largely in line with inflation in South Africa. Interestingly, Joburgers spend the most, followed by Cape Townians and then Durbanites in the analysis that's been conducted. And if you look at the rate of increase year on year, Joburgers increased by about 3%. The rate of increase in spend in Durban and Cape Town slightly outpacing that in Johannesburg. What is, I think, notable is the kind of the consistent increase that we're seeing, and at levels slightly above where they were post-COVID, and importantly, reflecting on the kind of the nature of the spend in the analysis, it is largely discretionary in terms of disposable income, and therefore reflecting the fact that South Africans in the main have largely adjusted to a higher interest rate environment, and that's important as we think about how 2024 is likely to play out in the balance of the year. One of the interesting insights that we've seen in this analysis is just how South Africa has contrasted relative to the rest of the world. And what we've noted is that almost sort of across all income segments, whether kind of mass all the way through to the high net worth category, when you analyze the rate of change in South African spend compared to the other markets across the globe that we observed, what you see is that there's kind of a relative stability across all income categories in South Africa compared to their counterparts globally. And in fact, you don't see the wild swings that we observe in some of the other markets where consumer spending tends to kind of be much more volatile. South Africans, I think, are well known for the resilience that we exhibit in sort of almost everything that we do. Spending is almost exactly the same. We kind of are consistently increasing spenders compared to the counterparts that we see across the rest of the world. And in fact, where you see countries in Europe in particular, or cities in Europe and the US in particular, you can see the cost of living impacts coming through more clearly in those markets where you've seen significant increases in spend that's driven. In the South African environment, the mass market saw a slight decrease in spend, and that's largely as a result of crowding out due to interest rates, where you see it most clearly, and a small increase in the high net worth segment, which is less exposed to the interest rate effects that we've seen through the cycle. When you look at what South Africans spend their money on, as Lineshree said, 2/3 or nearly 2 out of every 3 rands spent in disposable income goes towards groceries, fuel, retail, and travel, and that's those are the kind of the key buckets that we see in South Africa across all segments. In all of the segments, other than the high net worth category, you see groceries making up the largest component of the basket of spend amongst South Africans, and I think that is kind of intuitive, but it's borne out in the statistics. That flips around when you get to the high net worth segment, which is the kind of top 5% of spenders in the analysis, where travel becomes a significant component, and in fact is more aligned to what you see in developed markets. And across all segments, what's interesting is you see a fairly consistent spend or proportion of spend going towards eating and takeout, almost agnostic of income category in South Africa. When you juxtapose that against the emerging market basket and the developed market basket, what you see is that developed markets tend to spend a lot more on eating out and travel, aligned to kind of the lifestyle behaviors that we observe in those segments, less on fuel and typically less on groceries. So kind of a much higher proportion on eating out, and I'll go into a little bit of detail on that as well. What is interesting is kind of South Africa often reflects multiple markets within a kind of single economy, and you see that playing out incredibly strongly. We often say South Africa is kind of a melting pot and a laboratory that we observe from kind of developing all the way through to the most sophisticated consumers globally, and that's exactly what you see playing out in this analysis. If you delve into the detail, in a little bit more detail, what you see is kind of once again a moderation of increases in spend across the grocery and eating out category, where groceries and eating out after the kind of significant increases in spend that we saw post-COVID, where we saw a massive rebound and the effect of some of the inflationary pressures on input components last year. We saw moderation this year, much closer to kind of food inflation in both the grocery and the eating out category. What's interesting is that we saw the largest increase on average number of transactions in the high net worth segment on groceries. And if you think about the kind of one of the key emerging trends or areas in South African spend habits, this is kind of reflected in the spend itself, where we see just a significant number of on-demand and home delivery services coming to the fore in South Africa. And you can see that's really kind of driving the increase in the number of transactions that we see, in particular in the kind of the everyday affluent, the mass affluent, and the high net worth segment, where the number of transactions in groceries are increasing significantly. The average value remaining fairly stable, but really kind of reflecting the fact that home delivery as a kind of service in South Africa is really gaining traction and driving a significant increase in the average spend per card, just given how convenient it actually is. If you look at the kind of the other insights that we see at both a global and domestic level, as reflected in some of the previous slides, emerging market cities tend to have almost the kind of the opposite proportion of spend in eating out and takeout and groceries to what we see in developed markets. And it's kind of that flip that we see reflects a combination of access, lifestyle, and affordability in terms of eating out and takeout in kind of developed market cities relative to what we see in the emerging market cities, including South Africa in the analysis. In the case of the kind of the intercity analyses that we're able to conduct in South Africa, what you see is that Joe Burgers do spend the most on eating out, slightly more than what you find in Cape Town. As the data team pointed out to me, these aren't necessarily Joe Burgers spending in Cape Town. These are kind of Joe Burgers in total. They spend wherever they go in terms of eating out. And it flips around slightly when you look at the grocery spend, where Cape Townians tend to spend a bit more on groceries than the rest of the country in terms of the average spend per card. What is also interesting is that grocery spend as a proportion of the total tends to differ between online and in-store by age, and that's something that we're able to see in the Discovery Bank data, whereby 30 to 40-year-old families, where you have a kind of a primary card holder or principal in the 30 to 40-year-old category, tends to spend the most online in terms of their grocery shopping relative to the rest of the base, and that's really reflective often of a kind of digital adoption in that segment, as well as younger families and kind of the convenience that it represents. Often when you have young kids in a family of online and home delivery coming through clearly. So we kind of see lifestyle behaviors coming through in terms of people's preferences as well in the analysis. What is also interesting is that from a discovery perspective, we can, in addition to the spend trends and behaviors that we see, we can also see at kind of a microscopic granular level the actual items being purchased in a grocery basket, and it's kind of that combination of global data in terms of the kind of the Visa database and absolute kind of granular microscopic data at an individual item level in the Discovery Bank data that we're able to bring together. And you can see that in the case of Discovery Bank clients, nearly 2/3 of the baskets that our clients bought in terms of their groceries were fruit and vegetables, so kind of healthy foods that we see coming through, which is really encouraging. And what's interesting is that people that manage their money well tend to manage their health well, and vice versa. And we can see that clearly in terms of the Vitality Money status and the Vitality Health status correlations that we see in our data, which are incredibly clear in terms of the way that people manage their finances and manage their health, correlating directly, and that manifests in significant savings. That over the last year, our clients, our Discovery Bank clients, benefited by over 300 million rand back on healthy food items in terms of their grocery baskets. So a significant reward, and kind of reflecting exactly the theme that Lineshree spoke to. The second kind of key area of how people spend their money that we focused on, once again, is travel. And as Lineshree said, after last year's revenge travel bounce back that we saw, this year we've seen really kind of a moderation, but at this elevated level of spend that we saw post-COVID. So when you look at the overall travel spend and frequency, what you see is that across all of the markets, all of the cities in the analysis, we see a fairly sort of consistent and stable level in terms of the number of transactions around travel that we observed in SpendTrend24 compared to 23, but reflecting kind of an inflationary increase in terms of the total spend, and that's reflected across all of the South African markets in particular, but all markets in the survey reflecting a very similar trend. If you look at the kind of the Discovery Bank client base relative to the South African client base, we've observed a slightly higher increase in travel spend, and I think it reflects the kind of the travel ecosystem that's been built in Discovery Bank for our clients, and that once again reflected about 670 million rands worth of savings that they generated relative to the retail price of the travel tickets that they purchased using the Vitality Travel platform, bringing together kind of healthy food and healthy travel savings. Our clients saved about 1 billion rand over 2023 in this analysis between those two key areas of spend, and that's something that we're really, really proud of. The spend domestically on travel is obviously incredibly important from a South African economic activity perspective, and it is something that we focused on in last year's analysis, where we said that traveling in South Africa is kind of one of the greatest gifts that COVID unearthed, in a sense, discovering the benefits of domestic travel. And if you look at the kind of the deep analytics that we're able to run, what we've seen is that after the significant price increases that we saw last year in domestic travel, we've seen a leveling in terms of the cost of an airline flight across virtually all markets in South Africa. And in fact, you can see kind of the price of a flight ticket from Joburg to Cape Town and vice versa remaining fairly stable year on year. We also ran analyses of when is the most economical time to actually book a flight. And what's interesting is that while I guess the averages talk to a very stable price, what we see is a 30 to 40% price differential between the lowest cost ticket during the week and the highest price ticket between different cities during the week. And so if you do want to fly on the cheapest flight between Joburg and Cape Town, or from Joburg to Cape Town, you're going to have to wake up very early to catch the 5:55 a.m. flight on a Sunday morning, and that'll get you there at the lowest cost. Or if you're a little bit more flexible, or you like to sleep in, but you're still pretty flexible, then flying on a Tuesday from Joburg to Cape Town will be the cheapest day to get there. The most expensive day to fly from Joburg to Cape Town is on a Friday, and particularly Friday afternoon. And I think anybody that's been to the airport on a Friday afternoon will be able to attest exactly the reason for that. What's interesting is that Joburg and Cape Town are still by far the biggest routes in terms of endpoints, but we are seeing an increase. We saw a 20% increase in the number of flights to the kind of garden route, ending in George over the last year, reflecting this phenomenon of moving to coastal areas that we saw starting in the COVID period, and that's been sustained post-COVID as well. Internationally, if we look at the travel patterns, we've seen significant increases in the price of flights internationally, and while we saw kind of domestic air travel pricing level off, we've seen the price of an international flight ticket increase by about 20% plus across all of the major routes. We've done a detailed analysis over the last year of those routes, and while the UK is still the number one route for South Africans in terms of endpoints, what is interesting is that travel is more and more experiential in many respects, and you can see that coming through clearly in the fact that France was the single biggest destination last year in the European Union for South Africans, and that's reflecting a significant increase and associated almost entirely with the Rugby World Cup and South Africans going to watch the Springboks win. So one of the most notable kind of observations in SpendTrend24 is kind of how much South Africans love rugby, how patriotic we are, and kind of the Springbok fans that we saw playing out in the trend. That's actually notable to the extent that it affected the actual travel results and behaviour of South Africans. In terms of the other key area of spend, as I said, there are four key areas around groceries, travel, fuel being the third key area of where we spend our money as South Africans. We're able to use the data that we have in Discovery Insure, which tracks about 2 to 3 billion kilometers of trips per annum amongst our Discovery Insure clients. Over the last 5 years in this analysis, we've got over 10 billion kilometers of data that we're able to analyze amongst Discovery clients. And what you can see in 2023 over the calendar year is an increase in the average trip length and the average kilometers driven by Discovery Insure clients that we're able to analyze. And that reflects kind of the statistic that you see in the top right-hand corner, where about 75% of clients who work from offices are now commuting at least 3 days a week. So kind of while hybrid is still very much in force, we're seeing a return to office coming to the fore, and that's coming through in terms of the average trip length. We also, through the data that we have at our disposal, are able to geolocate our clients in terms of where they live and where they work, and then map that back, which creates a really kind of interesting analysis and insight that people are driving further back to the offices, but then spending most of their day in the office when they do so. Importantly, from a Discovery Bank perspective, this is kind of the third key area of rewards and value that we've really focused on as a bank, and we returned over 300 million rands worth of fuel funding to our clients over the course of the calendar year. So then, looking at how people spend their money, and kind of the third aspect of the analysis of SpendTrend24, and as you heard from Lineshree's introduction and the kind of the themes that Visa are observing, digital wallets and digital spending is increasingly prolific across all markets, but in particular in the case of South Africans. And as a digital bank, this is incredibly important for us at Discovery. If you look at the digital wallet usage, you can see from a base of close to zero in 2020, just the rapid acceleration of digital wallet usage across South Africa. And in the kind of the dark purple, you see the Discovery Bank client base outpacing the South African average significantly. And you kind of that's probably quite intuitive that digital bank clients tend to bank digitally and spend digitally, and that's reflected in the kind of the trend that we see. What is interesting is that South Africans and the South African cities in the analysis reflect a significantly higher rate of digital wallet growth than other international markets included in the analysis. And the rate of digital wallet spend grew by about 45% across all markets in South Africa year on year, significantly outstripping the kind of the rate of growth that we see across the globe. And you can see the kind of the effect of the improved security, the convenience, and the rapid adoption in terms of point-of-sale devices and acquiring devices that we see in South Africa. So I think, we I think as South Africans often take it for granted how advanced our kind of financial services and banking systems are, but you see it reflected in a global analysis like this very, very strongly. What is interesting is then in the very right-hand side, the absolute kind of percentage of digital wallet payments as a percentage of in-store in South Africa is amongst the highest in the world. And once again, kind of just reflecting the sophistication of our economy, of our digital payments economy, and the kind of the convenience of having your bank card in your phone digitally at the point of sale. If you look at the online spend as a proportion, and this is kind of a trend that we've seen over the years and really kind of emerging strongly. The proportion of spend on online continues to grow as a percentage of the total and in absolute terms. And in the case of in the case of groceries in particular, we see online grocery shopping, or we saw online grocery shopping in the last year increasing by 10% compared to in-store, which grew by 2%. So continued growth in both kind of environments, but the online grocery shopping increasing significantly more than in-store. And once again, reflecting this kind of emerging trend and traction of home delivery in particular, which is increasingly reliable and convenient and simple and accessible for South Africans. And that as it's been rolled out, we see that coming through in the way that people spend. What is interesting, though, is kind of the fact that it's not binary, in a sense, online versus in-store. And probably the best single day to kind of see this playing out was on Black Friday of last year, which is typically the highest spending day of the year for shoppers, whereby we see the kind of the patterns of shoppers and consumers change over the course of the day, where a lot of the purchases and the shopping begins online very early, often at like 12:01 a.m. for the real bargain hunters who are literally waiting online, and about a third of the purchases are made before 9 in the morning when you are online. But then there was a reversal of prior year trends, where we then saw about 80% of purchases being made in store compared to 75% last year. And so kind of a return to in-store shopping where you can touch the kind of the goods and experience them and see them and get the kind of the best deals in store as well. What is interesting is the fact that people are buying large purchases online, and the average transaction size online grew by about 18% year on year. And that reflects, once again, kind of people really targeting where they're going to be spending on Black Friday for large, high-cost items and seeking out value in that space. The other key area that we see significant growth online in is in the entertainment space, which grew 10% online. A lot of that is around esports and gaming, but also streaming. And in the case of the kind of the streaming services, we're able to actually see exactly which streaming services are most popular amongst Discovery Bank clients, and the age categories in which they are. And what you see from the analysis is that in terms of streaming, the number one category are Netflix subscribers between the ages of 40 to 50, and that reflects kind of the buying habits of South African consumers today. So when you look at the analysis in terms of how much people are spending, we've seen sort of a moderation over this last year, but real resilience among South African consumers, particularly in the context of the financial stress and pressure that is the result of the increased interest rate cycle that we saw over the last year. And in particular, not just kind of comparing to SpendTrend24, but in comparison to other global counterparts across the world. When you look at what people spend on, it is typically kind of consistent year on year, with 2/3 of the spend manifesting in groceries, retail, travel, and fuel, which make up the majority of South African spend. But interestingly, the surge in revenge travel being sustained and continued in both domestic travel and internationally, where we're seeing this kind of experiential travel really play out strongly. And then the third trend, once again, a very, very strong shift to digital banking, to digital wallets, and South African adoption really kind of accelerating relative to global counterparts, but then also playing out at amongst the highest levels in the world. So when we think about 2024 and how this is likely to manifest, a number of insights that the SpendTrend24 analysis allows us to then extrapolate into this next year. And as we see interest rates being higher for longer globally and in South Africa as well, we think that South Africans will continue to focus on kind of seeking out value, being budget conscious, managing their kind of spend in line with the increased interest rates. But at the same time, towards the end of the year, the expectation is that we'll see that cycle start to reverse, and that is likely to once again fuel continued growth in spend and discretionary spend, disposable income in particular. We continue to see the trend of digital payments playing out strongly, and we expect this to be sustained. Contactless becoming kind of the primary mechanism for people to spend, being the most secure, most convenient, and South Africa really being a leader in the space. The phygital trend that Lineshree spoke about is incredibly strong, and we see that continuing. So kind of while online players and specialists will continue to really emerge in the market, and we see that coming through strongly. We see an omni-channel approach whereby home delivery, in particular in the grocery space, and in-store physical retailers really develop out their online strategies, and that will continue to see and fuel growth in both areas. And we expect to see continued growth in the entertainment space, streaming, gaming. It really is kind of fueling a new sector and segment that we see growing strongly in South Africa. So a number of insights that we see playing out, and a huge amount of work that it informs in the case of Discovery Bank, certainly in terms of the way we think about the services, the products that we offer to our clients, and you'll see that playing out over the course of 2024. So just from our side, a massive thank you to the Visa team for collaborating with us on this really important exercise for us at kind of both a consumer level and at a banking level. It is a privilege for us as Discovery Bank to partner with you. And on that note, I'd like to call Lineshree back up to the podium. And if there are any questions, we are happy, Aki, to take them.
Hi, good morning. It's Aki Anastasiou. Thank you very much. Great presentation. You did touch on the constraint in the economy, and you touched on the interest rates and how that's impacting it. You've painted a very rosy picture of, consumer spending is robust and everything, but the reality in the market is that there is a massive business confidence issue, and other banks who are reporting similar numbers show a very constrained economy, and in fact, footwear and clothing is down, and consumer confidence is really down, especially since the start of COVID. Improved a little bit, but it's remained down in the country. Are you experiencing the same kind of confidence issues as a bank at Discovery? And as Visa, are you not seeing any downward trends in certain markets? Because you're comparing data specifically with Discovery Bank card holders, but the bigger picture across the board, does it show a constrained market where there is, serious business confidence in the country at the moment?
You wanna go first?
Yeah, maybe I can start with the overall picture that we're seeing in the market from a Visa perspective. I think we presented in some of the data, what we're seeing in the market is consumers are spending a lot more of their money on essentials. Things like groceries, fuel, are things that consumers are focusing on. Again, very reflective of the fact that, there is cost pressure. We have definitely seen a slower growth when it comes to non-discretionary items, for example, travel. So across the market, travel has only grown 6% this year, very much in line with inflation as well. And I think I'll add perhaps one more data point to it. I think Hylton presented for Discovery Bank some of the trends they saw on Black Friday. But when we look at the overall market, we've seen consumers seek out, I think, two of the highest sort of spend categories we saw is consumers looking at travel service and airlines, perhaps again, for those more discretionary spends, going to look for deals during that Black Friday period. I think when we look at the overall growth of the market, the essentials, we're seeing a lot more growth, and whereas the nice to have and discretionary spend, there's very muted or almost, level growth from what we've seen last year.
Issue is there. Consumer confidence is not great at the moment.
So I think there's definite pressure. I think there's stress on consumers, and it tends to vary by segment as well. I think that's one of the insights, and we can see the effect of interest rates, particularly at a segment level, as you would have seen in one of the slides. The kind of the mass segment having a decline in spend of about 3% year on year. And the kind of mass affluent and everyday affluent being fairly stable, and then the high net worth increasing. So I think a large determinant of stress in particular, I guess, in retailers and in bank books will be determined by the segment that you're focusing on. And so from our perspective, we've seen fairly kind of resilient credit loss ratios in the bank. We have seen an increase, I think, as we reported, but fairly resilient, below the rest of the market. But even in the kind of the overall market, I think we've seen it being fairly contained. But obviously, I think one of the insights, as Lineshree alluded to, is the fact that consumers are becoming probably more discerning in terms of how they spend their money. So that's certainly, we see a substitution effect in terms of where people are spending their money and how they're spending their money. So far more targeted, as you saw the Black Friday sales being kind of like really targeted in the way people think about how they're spending their money, and really budgeting according to kind of the interest rate environment. So you do expect to see consumers being more cost conscious, but we still continue to see spending. And that's been, I think, one of the kind of the standout features is that South Africans are resilient, and the spending that we're seeing is resilient. And I actually think that is reflected in the overall GDP, that while it's not growing at the pace that we need it to grow faster, it certainly continues to grow. And when you see other markets globally are in kind of technical recessions, in South Africa we continue to kind of see moderate growth. It does need to be faster, but it tends to be more resilient.
Hi, I just wanted to know, did you do any research on load shedding and the spending on inverters and solar power, etc., for consumers?
Do you want to go first? Or?
I'm happy to start, and then Lineshree can add to it. We did a lot of analysis in SpendTrend24 actually on load shedding, where it peaked in that period. And we actually saw some really interesting insights around how people actually eat out more during load shedding periods and load shedding peaks. I think what we're seeing in this year's analysis is that it isn't as material to spending patterns per se in terms of when people spend. And I think it's largely because people have acclimatized to manage load shedding in their kind of daily lives better and better. And I think it's that's probably one of the aspects that does reflect increasing solar, battery, kind of inverter take-up. In Discovery Bank, we've created funding for solar, so that might not be seen necessarily in kind of disposable income in terms of the category. It will fall into that other bucket. So doesn't fall into one of the 4 key categories that we've highlighted in the analysis. But we have certainly seen spend in that area. It tends to be one-off though, in the sense that there's an installation cost or a large purchase, and that's typically how we see it play out.
Yeah, I think just very much aligned to what Hylton said. Last year during load shedding stages 5 and 6, we saw really a lot of eating out, takeout, etc. We haven't seen the same this year. And it ties back again to discretionary spend versus non-discretionary, and the fact that consumers are feeling it a bit difficult in the environment. So if you look at groceries, we saw much stronger growth than actually takeout and eating out. So no direct correlation this year in terms of massive increase.
Hi, Mobile from Reuters. So loyalty cards. So in the office, naturally, we have colleagues from different parts of the country, right? One of the colleagues is from the US. He was fascinated by how, there's this obsession in South Africa with loyalty cards. I mean, I had to replace my wallet so that, I could fit my 20 loyalty cards for everything, basically. Are there any special nuances that you can talk about that are specific to South Africa compared to the other markets that you've looked at? Is it also driven by, obviously, the retailers, the banks themselves? Then this links to my other question, digital, wallet payments, yeah. Where, I'm not gonna say which bank, but certain banks, right, will kind of not force you, but tell you that, okay, if you use your virtual card, you will have more points, right? So is it also pushed by the banks themselves, the retailers themselves? And why did South Africa benchmark, well against global counterparts? Is it also because some of these payment wallets were recently launched in the country, or what?
Sure. So I think what we're seeing, it varies, right, globally, whether you're looking at developed markets, emerging markets, etc. But what we've seen are things like, getting cash back in certain markets, and we find that to be quite powerful loyalty. The other things are around the segments that you actually are addressing. So if you look at your affluent segments, in general, things like travel and concierge are important to them to, have discounts, etc. But when we look at loyalty now, and I think I made the point when we are going through this, consumers are looking for a lot more than just buying a product or service, and a lot more than just getting rewards back. When you look at Gen Z, you look at the more sophisticated consumer, they're looking for platforms, they're looking for a brand that actually personally they can affiliate with. Whether it's around the values, it's the purpose of that company, and how the rewards are structured around it. So what I've seen from, and I'll let Hylton speak obviously to the Discovery specific rewards platform, is that the rewards program that work really well really has the consumer at the center and understands both what is the banking and the non-banking needs of that consumer, and structure rewards around it. And I think that's where South Africa really has good programs that we've seen, from a global perspective. But then I also want to add one more point. I think when we're looking at different segments, travel, emerges as quite an important thing when you're looking at the affluent. And where they land, they also want to benefit from rewards, etc. And that's where, from a visa perspective, given that the countries that we operate in, we're able to have certain offers that we're able to make available to the banks, so that when you land in the UK or you land in Paris for the Olympics, there's certain things you can take advantage of. But from what I've seen, we probably have some of the most sophisticated reward programs in South Africa.
In that case, I think, if there aren't any further questions in the room, just a massive thank you to everybody for joining us here this morning. We are here and available to you for any questions that you might have after the session. Thanks very much for joining us.